It was the first in a series of memorial services for George Floyd that was held today in Minneapolis. And as his family's attorney, Benjamin Crump, said, it was not just a celebration of Floyd's life, but also a plea to the nation not to let him die in vain.
Dr. Martin Luther King said, "He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting against it is really like cooperating with it." What we saw was torture. The inhumane, the torture that they witnessed on that video. We cannot cooperate with evil. We cannot cooperate with injustice. We cannot cooperate with torture. Because George Floyd deserved better than that. We all deserve better than that. His family deserved better than that. His children deserve better than that.
Attendance at today's service was limited to 1,000 people, but many hundreds of thousands more mourned Floyd across the nation. And as they continue their call for change, we saw today that things have indeed changed at the White House, where more fencing and barriers were installed earlier this morning. And inside, the battle over the use of U.S. military force against those protesters is reportedly continuing on. Former Defense Secretary James Mattis recently added his voice to the growing crowd of Trump critics over that, saying in a statement, quote, "Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us," adding, quote, "We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of his deliberate effort. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership." Less than a year ago, Mattis said he wouldn't speak ill of a sitting president, but I guess everyone has their tipping point. Makes you wonder what might finally push people like Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski over the edge. Somehow, after all of this, she told reporters today she was struggling with whether to support Trump in November, saying, "When I saw General Mattis' comments yesterday, I felt like perhaps we are getting to a point where we can be more honest with the concerns that we might hold internally and have the courage of our own convictions to speak up." Yeah, courage would be a good thing. We are seeing indications that at least some leaders are ready to take real action, though. For example, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court justices issued an unusual, lengthy letter on some of what needs to be done to address systemic racism in the legal system, saying in part, quote, "As judges, we must look afresh at what we are doing or failing to do to root out any conscious and unconscious bias in our courtrooms. As lawyers, we must also look at what we're doing or failing to do to provide legal assistance to those who cannot afford it, to diminish the economic and environmental inequalities coming from race. And as members of the legal community, we need to re-examine why too often our criminal justice system fails to treat African Americans the same as white Americans." Close to 30 of the state's top elected leaders of color held a moment of silence this week at the State House. Among them, Suffolk County District Attorney Rachael Rollins, who also spoke out about the pain of the community during a press conference with Boston Mayor Marty Walsh on Monday.
People are disgusted and outraged, and they should be. And it is completely ironic to have to say to you, please don't be violent, please keep your voice down, please be silent and comply with all of the police's requirements, when in fact it's those very people that murder us with impunity. But that's where we are right now.
Suffolk County DA Rachael Rollins joins me now. District Attorney, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
When you first saw the video of the murder of George Floyd, what went through you?
I was just horrified and then just profoundly sad. I have teetered between rage and exhaustion since it came to light.
You know, following some of your statements the other day with Mayor Walsh, the Patrolmen's Association, the police union in Boston, issued a statement directed at you. Part of it reads, "Your statements were dangerous, divisive, and wholly unwarranted. While you quickly and cavalierly label all police officers murderers, the fact is the BPD officers responded to violent attacks against them with courage and restraint. Instead of slandering our officers as murderers, you should be highlighting their professionalism and dedication to the city. You put our lives and the safety of our great city at risk when you implicitly call for and condone violence." What did you think of what they had to say to you, DA?
I'm still waiting for their statement completely denouncing the murder by law enforcement of George Floyd. That's my first response. And secondly, Jim, I'm proud of the fact that not only the mayor, but several Boston city councilors, state reps and state senators have all called that president to call him on his letter to me. I have support from the NAACP Boston, Mass Black Lawyers Association, Mass Association of Hispanic Attorneys, GBIO, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, clergy and Black elected leaders. So this is, look, we are at a tipping point where Ben & Jerry's issued a statement, Jim, about the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and they make ice cream. They are not in the work of police as of yet. And so if our Boston Police Patrolmen Association and detectives don't feel comfortable saying this is not one of our own, then I have a problem with that, and I don't have a problem saying it out loud.
What do you read into the fact that they haven't issued such a statement?
I hope you ask them. I hope you ask them. I just think we have to work together to solve homicides, right? We have to work together to solve crimes. And when the very communities that are overwhelmingly where the violence happens don't feel as if you can stand up and open your mouth in something as egregious as George Floyd, then how are they to believe that we really care about them as human beings, let alone potential witnesses, victims, and defendants of our crimes?
Do you think the union speaks for its members when they made the comments like they made to you?
I don't know. You know, I would hope you'd ask them that question. But what I can say is last night I drove through the city just to see what was happening up and down Newbury Street. I saw hardworking men and women of the Boston Police Department protecting our streets and keeping us safe. My statements were never intended for the majority of officers that are upstanding, hardworking, courageous, and culturally competent that I work with every day. I'm talking about the outliers, the ones who, like Derek Chauvin, can kill. And the problem is when other people don't speak up, like Ben Crump said at George Floyd's funeral today, your silence is basically assent at this point. We are at a critical moment in time. We need loud and bold, courageous leadership.
Do you think there are people in the union, in the Boston Patrolmen Association, who don't think that Derek Chauvin is a murderer?
I don't know, Jim, because they haven't spoken out about it. I can't speak about what they believe because they took the time to write a letter about me instead of admonishing or denouncing Derek Chauvin. And what I will say, Jim, for your listeners, if you read the Washington Post, Sally Jenkins had the most phenomenal article recently about, you know, it started with choose a knee, Colin Kaepernick's knee or Derek Chauvin's knee, and you don't get to waffle in between. There are no half choices. I believe that's where we are right now.
You know, in the comments you made the other day, District Attorney, you also seemed to say, well, you did say that white people don't care, that we haven't listened, and that only the video woke us up. But there have been plenty of videos before. We cared, and then we moved on. Why do you think, or do you think, it's going to be any different this time, or will white people just move on from this one too?
And you know, white people isn't a bad word, just like black people isn't a bad word. I have the benefit of being biracial, so all of these people that are afraid to use words like that, I've lived my entire life in this space, but you know, it is a privilege to learn about racism through reading about it. And those of us that don't have to read it because we experience it every day are just tired of the fact that we've seen videos like this before and we've somehow moved on. I don't know whether the heinousness of this 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I don't know whether the absolute, failure, for example, in the Ahmaud Arbery case, which is, of course, the other black man that was running this time in Georgia, who was killed by a father and son and their, joint venturer. We've just been inundated with, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, David McAtee, Tony McDade. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Jim, is Christian Cooper and Omar Jimenez. And I think people are just fed up. They're just tired.
Omar Jimenez,
the
being
CNN
the reporter, CNN
that,
reporter who was arrested, and obviously Christian Cooper is the man who was had the cops called on him by Amy Cooper, a white woman in the Bramble in Central Park. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and so I'm just saying, my hope is that we aren't distracted by something else. We are in a moment right now. We never wanted to be here, but I think we have an opportunity to think creatively about how we're going to get out of this time better.
Let's talk about that creative way. I mean, virtually every protester wanted to see the 4 officers charged. They have been charged. A lot of people, you included, looking for serious criminal justice and police reform. Ed Markey joined me last night. I know you joined him in calling for an end to qualified immunity, which insulates police officers from personal liability, even if they've used excessive force. An editorial in the Boston Globe this morning said that state legislatures like ours should statutorily take away the right of police unions everywhere to negotiate discipline causes in their contracts, which in some cases give them 48 hours before they can be interviewed so they can, quote, get their story straight. Do you support the legislature getting rid of the right of police officers through their union to negotiate disciplinary clauses?
So let me start with what you first said. Yes, all 4 officers have been charged with respect to George Floyd's death, but that's only after the case was taken away from the DA, who did virtually nothing, charging Chauvin with 2nd and 3rd degree murder and nothing against the bystanding officers, right?
Correct.
2nd and 3rd.
Right.
And now, I'm sorry, yes. And
3rd.
Now it's been lifted up to 2nd. I apologize, you're correct. And then similarly with Ahmaud Arbery, 3 DAs did nothing until the Georgia Bureau of Investigations came in and within 24 hours made the arrest. So we don't have faith in my profession either. This is not just about the police. This is about DAs that sit silently and look the other way when they see bad behavior from people with badges. I do support us having discussions about some more oversight of law enforcement because we have just gone too far. So whether that is qualified immunity, whether that is some sort of community oversight or involvement, yes, I am happy to sit at the table and hear about that. Jim, that's why
You didn't put on that list what I asked you about, which was eliminating statutorily the right for police unions to negotiate disciplinary clauses. Would you support that as well?
I would support, what we've seen, there's obviously a police union in George Floyd's jurisdiction, and Mayor Frey had a spine and immediately terminated all of them, right, within 24 hours. So I think unions, we are never going to get over a unionized police force, but I do think there's powers, because if the police say, I won't speak to you within 48 hours, or I won't speak to you until I get my story straight, rather than asking, we can put them in front of a grand jury. So there are ways that we can get around that, Jim.
Well, one way, again, one last time I'll try, is eliminating statutorily the right to negotiate their disciplinary proceedings. Do you support eliminating that right?
I'm not sure if I do yet. I support anything on the table. I would need to read through that, and I haven't looked at their collective bargaining agreement. But what I can tell you that I do support, Jim, is sitting down at the table with members of law enforcement and the community that is enraged, and I think justifiably so, and working up solutions. I will end that point with, that's why I created a discharge integrity team when I became DA. It's the only one in the country where 4 outsiders and me look at every officer involved shooting and make a determination.
You mentioned that you fault your fellow DAs as well. Keith Ellison, the Attorney General there, elevated the charge against Chauvin to 2nd-degree murder. Many of the protesters think it should have been 1st degree murder, deliberate and premeditated. Did he undercharge Chauvin?
You know, that's a hard one, because I do think there could be an argument where, although maybe, and I will not even call him Officer Chauvin. I will call him Derek, because it dishonors the name of officer and the men and women that use that title with privilege and honor. But I don't think he walked up to George Floyd that day thinking he was going to kill him. But I think 8 minutes and 48 seconds is in nowhere near a split-second decision. He had hundreds of opportunities in that time to change what he was doing.
Meaning you think he intended to kill him when he ultimately
hate when you
did?
Keep asking me. Yes,
no,
I do
but that,
think
that is...
Yeah, I personally think second degree is going to be provable, and ultimately, if the same result is going to come out of first or second degree potentially, and we're looking at, he's in Minnesota. I'm not sure if they have the death penalty or what they're going to be asking for, but I think second is certainly better than third. And what I can tell you is we can always continue moving up with respect to charges, as we've seen what's happened here.
15 seconds. I want to be clear. You think he intended to kill Floyd at the end of that 8 minutes and 47 seconds?
I think he was he was deliberately indifferent as to whether he did or didn't. And I think this case is one where second degree murder is appropriate and should be charged. And if we learn more, we can always upcharge to first.
Rachael Rollins, thanks so much for your time as always. I really appreciate it.
Take care.